Everyone, and welcome to week 11 of American Literature. This week we get to read Walt Whitman. We're going to be looking at his biography found at the beginning. Then I'd like you to read the following poems: his most famous Song of Myself, Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, Out of the Cradle Endlessly Rocking, When I Heard a Learned Astronomer, When Lilacs Last and Dooryard Bloomed, and then Live Oak with Moss. Then I'd like you to participate in a close reading exercise. Here is the title page of Leaves of Grass. Notice how Walt Whitman is dressed. He's not wearing a collared shirt like someone of his time period would be wearing. He is creating an image of himself as a poet, of what what he thought Emerson was asking for in his essay, The Poet, somebody who was a bard of American poetry. He was inspired by that essay that Emerson wrote in 1842. At the center of his work is the human body and the human experience. Whitman broke away from form. When you look at his poetry, it's very different from all of the poetry that we've read before him. He wrote in free verse, and he used something called catalogs, where he would provide these long lists of things. You'll see that a lot in Song of Myself. He was born May 31st, 1819 in West Hills, Long Island, and he moved to Brooklyn and spent a great deal of his life in Brooklyn. He spent a lot of time working as a journalist. He also was a nurse in the Civil War, which deeply affected his work. Leaves of Grass began to take shape in his journals. Leaves of Grass is his most famous book, and it began to take shape in his journals from 1853 to 1854. His work completely defied convention. He wrote a lot about homosexuality, and was often he often got in trouble for that. In fact, Thoreau found his work too sexual. Instead of publishing new volumes, though, he would publish new editions of Leaves of Grass with just more poems in it, or with the poems put in different arrangements. He did write other books, but his main book was Leaves of Grass. He died on March 26, 1892. Before you read Leaves of Grass, I'm going to work with you on a little section of Leaves of Grass called I Celebrate Myself and Sing Myself. It's a very important and well-known section of the poem. Whitman published Song of Myself in the collection Leaves of Grass, a book he worked on for over 25 years. He issued at least 6 editions of the book, beginning in 1855, and some scholars consider each reprinting as a separate edition. Consequently, they count 9 editions, constantly rewriting, shifting, and occasionally eliminating poems. Song of Myself and Leaves of Grass as a whole was intended as a response to Ralph Waldo Emerson's appeal for the emergence of a truly American poet who would treat subjects unique to the new country in an expansive, open manner. Whitman heeded this call, creating in Leaves of Grass an inclusive, all-embracing version of the self in a speaker who can contain multitudes, as he put it. Song of Myself is characterized by its eagerness to describe absolutely everything, from a blade of grass to a railroad, from naked swimmers to an urban butcher, from a trapper in the West to a runaway slave. Whitman wanted to catalog all of America in a democratic epic and to break down boundaries. Leaves of Grass and Whitman himself were controversial. Some critics were shocked by his convention-defying style, by his treatment of subjects they considered inappropriate and indecent. Indeed, Whitman was fired from his government job after an official read and was offended by Leaves of Grass. Other readers saw in Whitman's poetry a revolutionary new style, and his work has had a profound influence on subsequent American poetry. So here's the section we're going to be working from. I celebrate myself and sing myself. I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume, you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul. I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. My tongue, every atom of my blood, formed from the soil, this air, born here of parents born here, from parents the same and their parents the same. I, now 37 years old, in perfect health begin, hoping to cease not till death. Creeds and schools and abeyance, retiring back a while, sufficed at what they are, but never forgotten. I harbor, for good or bad, I permit to speak at every hazard, nature without check, with original energy. So who is the I who acts as a speaker here? Should we understand the speaker as synonymous with the historical Walt Whitman? What clues does the poem provide that the speaker is more abstract and more expansive than a single individual? What kinds of connections does the speaker imagine between me and you, between himself and history, between himself and nature? This excerpt is the opening of a much longer poem. It is the first of, in most editions, 52 sections. What kind of poem does this opening promise? What do you expect to follow? Song of Myself is written in free verse, with no regular meter or rhyme. Instead, Whitman uses repetition, stress patterns, and parallelism to create links and connections between lines and between images. Where do you see patterns and repetition in this excerpt from Song of Myself? The speaker opens by telling us he will celebrate himself and sing himself. How does this opening line engage with the poetic tradition of calling on a muse? How do you understand the verb sing here? Why do you think Whitman emphasized singing in his first line and titled the poem Song of Myself? Is it a song? What is the relationship between activity and observation in this excerpt? Why does the speaker emphasize his passive loafing line found in line 5? The body and physical experience were very important to Whitman. His poetry is characterized by a frankness about bodily functions and bodily sensations. How is the speaker's body described here? What is the significance of the speaker's interest in a single spear of grass? Grass is an important and recurring image in this poem, as the title of the book, Leaves of Grass, makes clear. Why do you think grass was such an important symbol for Whitman? What qualities of grass might interest him? What is the effect of Whitman's inclusion of specific biographical details in lines 7 and 8? Why does he discuss his parentage and his age? Do these lines undermine the inclusive and expansive claims the speaker self makes in earlier lines? How does the speaker feel about creeds and schools, line 10? What does the speaker permit to speak through him in line 12? What is the effect of this claim to be channeling forces outside of himself? How does the verb permit work here? Is the speaker in control of the forces that speak through him? To what degree? Finally, you're going to write a response paper on any of the other sections of Leaves of Grass or any of the other poems you were assigned to read by Walt Whitman this week. I'd like you to provide a close reading of the poem, similar to how you were prompted to write a close reading of I Celebrate Myself and Sing Myself through the questions that I just read to you. When you write about Whitman, I want you to write about not only the poem, but how he was an American poet, how he responded to Emerson's call for an American bard. Your paper should be 2 to 3 pages long, and it should be written in MLA format. Please use multiple examples from the text to support the points that you make in your paper. All right, you guys, I hope you have fun with Walt Whitman this week. I hope you read him aloud, and I hope that you have some fun reading him aloud. Basically, he's pretty fun to read aloud. All right, I will see you guys online.